It's still a hot button issue, and we've heard a lot from commuters who would face those higher tolls for driving into Midtown.
Yeah, but now there's another complaint. The MTA's congestion pricing plan for Midtown, driving would disproportionately hit some groups and businesses really hard. So it's wrapped up in a report called "Just Call It a Black and Brown Toll," and it comes out of the Black Institute.
Yeah, and here to talk about it is Jacob Scupp. He is the Black Institute's Director of Research. Jacob, thanks for being with us this morning. Tell us the basic flaws you find with congestion pricing.
Well, thank you, Hazel and Craig. The basic flaw with this plan is just that it's inequitable. The impacts of congestion pricing will not apply evenly, despite it being an aggressive tax. This will hit commuters of color, and it will hit drivers of color, taxi and FHV drivers, that much more heavily than any other group.
Can we talk about specifics? How high would the tolls would be to drive into Midtown, like affect places like Harlem or the Bronx?
Well, so it's funny you mentioned Harlem and the Bronx. So the zone, as you know, is below 60th Street. That's the central business district. But we're going to see anywhere from $9 to $23 in tolls. It depends on the scenario they choose. But for hire vehicles, here's the kicker: they already pay $2.75 to drive below 96th Street. They would have to now pay also that $9 to $23.
So, okay, let's move on to another issue. You believe the entire environmental assessment plan on the impact of traffic flow changes, you believe that should be withdrawn. Why is that?
Well, because the plan is flawed. The MTA did not do their due diligence when it came to assessing the impact that this plan would have on communities of color, and especially the FHV industry. They have an environmental justice section, but it's so full of fluff. There's nothing to it, and that's a real problem when we're talking about a city that is majority minority. To not in your plan give those communities the sort of attention that they really need.
I hate to ping pong back and forth, but you were mentioning how this is going to have an impact on for-hire vehicles. So how is this going to affect? How would that affect minorities then? What's the the ripple down effect here?
Well, so here's the thing: the FHV industry, taxis are 96% people of color, and for-hire drivers, Uber, Lyft, etc., they're 91% people of color, the drivers. This is an industry that is overwhelmingly composed of people of color. When the MTA talks about the impact that congestion pricing would have on this industry, they talk about a 1 to 22% decline in the industry. That's tens of thousands of minority jobs that will just vanish that they're talking about. And, for commuters, they will be introducing tolls across the East River on untolled bridges. And, the fact of the matter is, people can't afford to be paying more tolls right now.
Well, okay, let me get your opinion on this. Can the city do things to mitigate the effect of tolls on businesses and the people you say disproportionately affected by it?
Well, they can, to an extent. The law enabling the MTA to do this is the 2019 MTA Reform and Traffic Mobility Act, and there is a stipulation in there that anybody making below $60,000 gets a tax credit for tolls. But that's not enough. The cost of living in New York, it's high. It's higher than that. You're leaving out tons of people for whom an extra $9 to $23 a day, putting aside the impact that it would have on FHV and taxi drivers, even just regular commuters, they can't afford to be paying an extra $9 to $23 a day.
Go ahead. Your report, though, before we go, because we're running out of time here, your report also suggests that the MTA should get more money from the state, but that would mean upstate residents would see more, would have to pay more, right, coming into New York City. Do you feel like it's fair then for those folks coming from upstate?
Well, so we think that the MTA does not get enough funding from the state. You know, it's forced to sort of rely on tolling passengers on Long Island Railroad and the subways, et cetera. And this plan is meant to address the $15 billion deficit in their 2020 to 2024 capital plan. But this is just not the way to do it. You know, we shouldn't be taxing our most vulnerable communities for upgrades that will benefit everybody. So, you know, do I think that upstate New York, you know, I don't think it's really quite. I think that this is something that we need to consider in terms of, like, you know, a greater benefit for New York.
Fair enough. Jacob Scupp, Research Director for the Black Institute. Thanks again for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Hazel and Craig.